stock options, we'll give them to you. The important thing is to make sure you're following that plan document, because short of unusual circumstances, when you go out and get a plan document from an attorney, whoever else you're going to use, especially an attorney, they're not going to give you something that is not compliant with 409A. Now, it may be used in a way that's not compliant, which is why I say it's important to follow what it says. But when you go out and get a document, that's probably the best way to avoid it, especially if you know your employees are not sophisticated. It might be the most brilliant people on earth, but they're not on the phone with speed dial to an attorney to check to make sure what they're getting is okay. So you can encourage them to get an attorney and make sure on your end, because while it is their problem, the taxes are their problem, it's a problem you can easily solve on the employer side. And I'd say that's probably the best way to fix it, is to make sure, don't solve it, avoid the problem to begin with. Any other questions? Nope. Okay. Well, we'll go through this fairly quick, so we have some time for questions if they come up at the end. Common equity sources. So this is, we're talking about these different options, where, stock options, restricted stock units. Where is this coming from? Where are you getting these shares from? Original equity, the founders themselves. When you create a company, whether it's a corporation or an LLC, somewhere there's units. You pick a number. Normally your accountant or your attorney picked a number. Someone picked a number. And until you start giving it away, it's in two places. The founders have it, or especially if you've planned to grow, whether it's through stock options, you're going to expand, whatever the case may be. You may want to buy companies with your stocks. The company can hold shares. So let's say you give yourself 1 million shares. The company is created, it has 1 million shares. You can put into your treasury, that's normally it's referred to as your treasury stock, half of that. So half of it may just be sitting at the company unused. And half of it may be out with the founders. And so when we talk about who's getting we mentioned here on top, founders themselves, they're getting it directly from the company. But you can also, when you start giving out these equity-based compensation, you can go to that treasury, or you can take it from the founders themselves. And when we talk about, briefly, we talked about diluting the owner's share. That's what we're talking about, is they're giving up, one way or another, they're giving up their whole ownership. And that's something you need to be mindful of, especially if you have a set plan in mind. Later equity investors, we talked about angel investors, we talked about venture capitalists. Private equity, there's not a ton of difference between private equity and venture capitalists, other than perhaps how people think about them. And so these people are going to want stock from somewhere, and that comes, like I said, either treasury or from the founders who have it, or trading in options and selling it out. But they also are likely to create and split up. If you have one class of stock, you have 1 million shares, they may say, well, let's create preferred shares, let's create and use those preferred shares for equity. And so one thing to consider is, do you want to have owner stock, and some of the future slides talk about this too,